All motivation podcasts are strictly based on opinion. Any facts given should and will be backed up by a source. If a source is not given, then it should not be taken otherwise.
Now I'ma I get it until my numbers call. Till I'm just a name and a memory on my homies' wall. I be moving on, I'm trying to just build my dome up. Till I'm just a sign my toes up.
Welcome to the newest episode of Motivation Inspired. I am the host, Curtis Moore, aka Curly Mo, or of course you can call me Mo. And today's episode is going to be a recap episode, recapping the year of 2023 for Motivation Inspired. And also, I will be giving out announcements and what we will be looking forward to for 2024. But before I get into that, I want to say, or I want to give some insight of Motivation Inspired. Because of each and every one of you fans, I would like to thank you. I have been put in some of the top episodes of some of my listeners, top 5, top 10, and somebody actually put me as their number one listener. So I want to thank you, and I know a lot of people think, well, that's not a lot, but to me, I am very grateful for each and every fan that listens to my podcast. And I am trying to do my best to make this podcast an even better podcast. And I will get into that later. But I would like to say that my podcast is actually doubled or almost tripled the listeners of 2023 rather than 2022. So I would like to say thank you for anybody that has been part of my podcast world. And thank you for anybody that has been sharing my episodes. But to recap 2023, I started a series that was a year-long series called Dating, Doomed, or Destined, where I talked about the dating world and is it doomed or is it destined to get better? And I had several different good episodes. My first being called, Excuse Me, What's the Problem? And in that episode, I talked about the problems that is affecting our dating world today. And in that episode, I had discussed what people's focus was, and that was the main problem in the dating world is people's focus was completely off of what they should be focused on in the dating world. Some of the examples were people was focusing more on the sex rather than the things that they needed in a relationship. They put, if this person was good in bed before, well, is this person going to be good for me? And I'm not sitting here saying that you shouldn't put that as a priority, but you need to make sure your priorities are in order. Another one was we focused on more of what we want now than what we need. And that has seemed to be a big issue in the dating world today. Everybody got their own wants, and instead of trying to compromise, instead of us trying to compromise, we decide that it's best for us to just leave that person and find exactly what we want. And come to find out, what we want isn't always completely what we need. And then the next episode was called You Get What You Give. And in that episode, I explained that everybody has their own wants and what they want in a relationship. But at the same time, are you willing to give exactly what it is that you want? And in that episode, I talk about if you're giving yourself in a different manner than what you want, then basically you're going to get something different than what you want. And some examples of that episode is women wanting men with money and good jobs and stuff, but they're not having a good job and money and treating them in that type of manner. Men want these good looking women with the big booty and all that stuff, and then turn around and not being loyal to them. So you get what you give. Whatever you put out there in the world is what you're going to get back. And whatever you won't put out there in the world, you got to put it out there, or you got to put what you want out there to get what you want. And the next episode I talked about was called Man, Bump Them Kids. And in that episode, I discussed how kids is affecting people's dating in the dating world, and how they affect it, how we treat them kids, if we're dating somebody with kids, and how they affect the dating world. A lot of people allow their kids to mess up their dating world because they're so focused on making sure that the kids are happy rather than making sure themselves is happy. And it's not necessarily a bad thing depending on how you look at it. But at the same time, if your kids are basically trying to mess up your dating world because they don't like the person and you allow them to mess that up, then that is on you. You have got to prioritize and not let your kids mess up your dating world. And basically in that episode, I talked about you got to look at the situation and think, do I need to step away from this dating world and focus on my kids? Or am I allowing my kids to be too much in this dating world and step up and be the parent to them kids that you're supposed to be, and set them down and let you work on your dating world? And the next episode is actually my number one episode of all time. I've had the most views, I've had the most reactions, and it was number one in 2023 and actually number one in all of my podcast episodes. And it is called Let's Talk About Sex, Baby. And I talked about how sex is not only affecting the dating world, but the world in general. It was an uncensored episode, so there were some things that I said that wasn't PG, but it needed to be said. And in this episode, I talked about how sex isn't sacred anymore, that people is using sex in all types of ways, and it's not being treated as quote unquote a reward anymore. Instead of being able to go out on a date and everything goes good and eventually the relationship ends up being rewarded in having good sex, sex is everywhere now. Sex is used at the very beginning of dating, and people is using that as a choice to whether they should date a person or not. You can see sex in anything rather than it being a gift that's soon to be uncovered. It's out there now, and it's affecting not only the dating world, but the world in general. You can see it on TV, you can see it on social media, you can see it everywhere. So sex isn't sacred anymore. And it has affected the dating world in a very huge way. And even when you get into dating a person and having sex with a person, a lot of times, if the sex isn't where either of the partners want it to be, they either look for it somewhere else or they add to it to try to make up for it rather than discuss it and explore each other's bodies or explore what their likes and dislikes is instead of having to basically talk about it between them two. They insinuate other things. So this episode, like I said, was an amazing episode. I really love doing it. And in the future, hopefully, I will have a rebuttal episode, not just dealing with it in a dating form, but dealing with it in general. The next episode that I went with was called Hold Up. Let me post it real quick. And in this episode, I basically discussed how the dating world is being affected by social media. How people is using social media and have it affect the dating world. And the social media is actually a good tool or can be a really good tool. But what I discussed in it is it depends on how you use it in your dating world. Now, if you are using it just to get attention and you have to have it and things like that, and it's affecting your relationship, then you shouldn't be using it as often. But if it helps your relationship, if you get some positivity out of it, then use it. What it boils down to is what I always say. Every individual person and relationships is different. So you and your partner has to decide whether it's good for your relationship or not. It is up to you. And then the next episode is called Different Strokes for Different Folks, which I just kind of expounded upon. And in that episode, we discuss how people is different. Every individual is different. So that means every relationship is different. What works for my relationship may not work for your relationship, and what works for your relationship may not work for the next person's relationship. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't hear out somebody's advice, because it may work for your relationship and you may be in denial about it. So also we have to look at it as when we're giving advice, just because it did work for my relationship doesn't mean it worked for that person. So we also discussed in that episode that you have different ethnicities, you have different genders, you have different types of relationships. So you can't just go with what you went by. You just have to figure out what is best for your relationship and let them figure out what is best for their relationship. And the next episode we discussed was called I Want a Divorce. And this episode was kind of personal to me, but I did do the episode and we talked about how divorce is affecting relationships. Getting back out there into the dating world. We discussed how it affects the relationship. We discussed that you cannot determine how long a person should or shouldn't start back dating. That different people, divorce affects in different ways, just like in anything else. But you can't allow what happened in your marriage and what happened in your divorce affect you in your dating world, because you're starting all over. And I did give some of my personal situations that I had when I had my divorce. But when it boils down to it, you have to be the one to decide when it's best for you to get back out in the dating world. Some people it may help them to jump on back out there to get their mind on off of what happened in a divorce. Some people they need that time away to be able to get themselves together before they get out in the dating world. So divorce is a horrible thing, and I hope that nobody has to go through it. It's a spiritual thing, and a lot of people don't realize how spiritual it is, but it really affects you in ways that you never realize. And until you have been through one, you really don't understand the repercussions. It is not a simple breakup. It is not a bad breakup. It is something much more deeper than that. And the next episode that came a little late, it actually came in this month, but it is here. And if you haven't heard it yet, you will hear about it. It's called The Ongoing Battle of the Sexes, Male versus Female Perspective in the Dating World Today. And I interviewed a male and a female, and we discussed, or I asked them different questions. I interviewed them and asked them different questions, and they gave their opinion on the dating world. And I basically went back and gave them questions from all the episodes that I had in this series. So that is a really good episode if you haven't heard it yet. And that ended our series, Dating Doomed or Destined. I ended it with that episode. And this final episode of the year, it was a special episode that it needed to be done. And it's called The World That We Live In. And this basically sets the tone for 2024. And in this episode, I discussed different things going on in the world that we live in, and how things have changed, how things are happening now compared to how things were back then. How the world is changing. Is it changing for the better or is it changing for the worse? And by this episode, it seems like things are changing for the worse. But we will see. And other than this episode, that actually ends our recap for the year. That actually explained 2023. And now I'm going to discuss 2024. As I said before, or as I said earlier, that last episode explains basically or sets the tone for the year of 2024. This year, Motivation Inspired is going to kind of ruffle some feathers a little bit, because I will be discussing some things that a lot of people see as controversial, a lot of people disagree with, but it's going to be deep. I feel like that I need to step out of my box and hit a little bit deeper and hit some things that people are probably going to be pissed off about. Let me just be honest. There are some things that people is going to like that I say, and there's some things that they're not going to like. This year, I'm not going to be stepping on eggshells. I will be discussing my opinion on things, and that is the reason why I have the disclaimer, All Motivation Podcast is based on my opinion. And anything that is based on facts will be backed up by a source. And if it's not backed up by a source, it should be treated otherwise. In other words, if I don't put a source on my podcast from something that is true, it is my opinion. But 2024, I will be getting into a little more controversial topics. Um, Also in 2024, I will launch my wrestling podcast. I am going to launch it. I have the equipment that I need, and I'm going to launch it. It's still going to be a motivational type uh, podcast, except it is going to discuss more of a wrestler's point of view on certain topics. We're not going to be checking out what's going on Raw and SmackDown unless it has to do with a specific topic or unless it's breaking news. So basically, I hope that you listen to this podcast. Hopefully, I will have a co host in this podcast. And hopefully, which is my next announcement, it will be a video podcast. I've been playing around with my video podcast, trying to see how it's going to work and stuff. So hopefully I will be able to get it launched and it'll be to your liking. I will be interviewing wrestlers around the area, wrestlers that I've came across in my life, and we'll be discussing certain topics. Going back to Motivation Inspired, hopefully I'll be able to give you more episodes. As I said before, I'm going to try to start doing Motivation Inspired at least the first week of the month, and maybe more than that, but we'll get into that another time. As far as the wrestling podcast, it'll probably be another one of the weeks during the month. It depends on when I have my co-host that we discuss times and everything. But I will try to have my podcast posted by Sunday evening. I have to go back and do editing and stuff for my Motivation Inspired podcast. But my video podcast is more than likely going to be live, so I will not be able to go back and edit. I may or may not. We're going to see. And we're going to see how it goes. But hopefully, like I said, I'm looking forward to having more episodes, more controversial episodes. And with that being said, my podcasts have been mostly a lecture podcast. But now what I'm going to invoke, I've listened to different podcasts, wrestling, other podcasts. I have other podcasters following me, and I'm following them, and I've listened. And what I have found, that it is a little more effective when you have guests on your show. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to start having guests on my show. It may not be every podcast, but I'm going to invoke that in my podcast this year. And hopefully it'll go as planned. I will be trying to talk to different people, people that I know, and hopefully some people that I don't really just know. But we're going to see how that thing goes. With that being said, I will probably also be going back when I do interview people. I will be going back to my podcast for the first year and get people's opinion on that podcast. Like, I have this one guy that I want to bring on that he is very talented, and it actually goes with my very first episode of Motivation Inspired, Finding Your Niche. And I'm thinking I'm going to go back and pick that back up and have him as a guest on my podcast talking about finding your niche. So we have that to look forward to. Also, I'm looking forward to posting my podcast on YouTube. Not the new episodes. I'm looking to go back and post my former podcast on YouTube. And the reason why I want to do it like that is because I really want people to subscribe to this podcast, to Spotify, and be able to subscribe I'm sorry, to be able to subscribe to this podcast, Spotify, or podcast on Spotify. I want it to be separate from the YouTube subscription. So what I'll be doing, I will be going back posting those episodes on my podcast, or of my podcast on YouTube. But I will also try to invoke some new podcasts strictly for YouTube. Yes, I will try to do that as well. That's going to put a lot on me this year. And with my health being like it is, I'm hoping that all of this work out. If it don't, please don't hold it against me. But I have a focus in mind that I want to try to get some things done. And I really hope that the Lord gives me the strength and the willpower to be able to do them. And be able to give me the sources to be able to do. Because as I said last year, I really want to get my business going. And in order for me to be able to get that going, I have to be able to start being more focused. I have to be able to start getting out there. I have to be able to put myself out there. So that is what I'm going to try to do for the year 2024. I will continue to promote things like OWO Wrestling. I am still a part of OWO Wrestling. I backed off of the wrestling part a lot more because of my health. Speaking of health, I want to still do my special on sarcoidosis, the condition that I have. A lot of people don't know I have this condition, and I want to do an episode on it. And I have been trying to decide if I'm going to do it as an audio or a video. And I'm thinking I'm going to go more towards the video. But I am going to do that special on sarcoidosis because I don't think a lot of people really understand how deep just the autoimmune disease in general is. Because I didn't understand it until I was diagnosed with it. So I will try to get that out there. I will be promoting, like I said, other businesses. Any business that wants to be promoted, if you get to me, then I will try to promote it. But at the same time, I want you to support my podcast and get it out there. I do have business cards. So if you need one, then holler at me. Go to my Facebook page, Motivation LLC, for updates. I haven't been on there recently. I have been distracted with other things, but it's time for me to get back focused on what's more important. Also, make sure you share and invite people to my podcast to listen to it. I'm pretty sure they would get something out of it. They could choose whatever episodes. You could go on there and like and subscribe. Also, give a good rating. This year, I would like to announce that so far, I have had a 5-star rating. Despite my country monotone voice, I have been rated 5-star. And I would like to thank all my podcast supporters for doing that for me. But this year of 2024, I look forward to it. I look forward to giving you more of what you want to hear. I look forward to interviewing different people. I look forward to launching my wrestling podcast. Come to my OWO shows. They're doing some great things. If you are in the San Antonio area, in Mississippi, go to Fitness 2000 and get fit. Connie Burton is a real great personal trainer, and his girlfriend, my cousin Tab, she is great as well. She also will get you the information you need about herbs and any other things. Check them out. check out the Blue City podcast. One of my fellow wrestlers, or several of my fellow wrestlers, is running that podcast, and I haven't listened to it often, but what I've listened to, I've actually enjoyed. That is all I have for today. I usually do a YouTube binge song of the week, so instead of doing that, what I'm going to do is the YouTube binge song of the year. The binge song that I have binged for the year. And that song is called Levitating by Dua Lipa. The remix featuring the baby. Of course, this is my song that I have listened to pretty much all year. So, I hope that you enjoy this song. This song I actually played at my birthday party, and I used to play it to hype myself up before I went out to eat or anywhere I needed to go. So this is a great song, and hopefully you'll still listen to it this year. And that is all for today. That is my recap for today. And I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that 2004 brings you long life and prosperity and a blessed year. And I also hope that I will continue to inspire and motivate your life one more time.